What is going on, friends? Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, the show that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn. Joining me today to talk about his new single, For Real, a collaboration with Grammy-nominated soul artist Aloe Blacc, is Eric Hirshberg. Eric, thank you so much for joining me tonight on My Weekly Mixtape.
Brian, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, since you're a first-time guest, let's start with the basics. What does the word mixtape mean to you?
You want to see my mixtape collection? I'll go to the garage and get it for you. Some of my best friendships that's still enduring started by exchanging mixtapes. When I went to Europe and backpacked through Europe after college, I made, one of those little carrying cases full of mixtapes. I still have them today in the garage, and it's such a great time capsule because it's like, what was I listening to the year I graduated college? And courting my wife, mixtapes. So they've just been a great time capsule. And that's all, of course, shifted to playlists now, but I keep that discipline alive because I do think, just like photo albums, collecting the music that you're listening to at any given moment is just a great way to mark the chapters of your life.
Amen. I like that mindset there.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, you've taken a pretty unique path into the music world. First as the CEO and Chief Creative Officer at Deutsch LA,
yep.
And then the CEO of Activision, home to video game behemoths like Call of Duty, Skylanders, Destiny, River Raid, if you grew up playing the Atari 2600 like I did.
Yep, Pitfall.
Oh my God, the hours I spent between Pitfall and Pitfall 2.
Yep.
And of course, for all of the music fanatics listening, Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
Did your path ultimately lead you to start creating music, or has music been running alongside your career the entire time?
It's a great question. It's always been there. And I started writing. So I played violin as a kid from age 5 to age 15. And then, like a lot of kids who play violin, I decided I wanted to play rock and roll. And I shifted first to the bass, then to the guitar. I wrote my first song, I think, when I was 15 years old. I was in a band with my older brother. And then he graduated, and then I had my own band, and then I had my own band at UCLA. And, when I was that age, this was what I thought I was going to do. And, we had a band with a following at UCLA, and we played a bunch of the cool LA clubs at the time. And, I remember feeling like we were maybe getting close, like an A&R guy from Warner Brothers showed up at a show and this and that, but, it never took off. And in the meantime, a whole other career did take off and kind of took over. And I kept performing and kept playing in bands well into my 20s, probably longer than was advisable from a career management standpoint. But my advertising career took off, and eventually I stopped performing, but I never stopped writing. And I kept waiting for it to kind of degrade itself to what I would call like a hobby status, where, it was something I did every once in a while. And it never did. It was just always kind of tugging at my shirt. And I always had songs running in the background, and I always had notes, to capture lyrics when they came and capture melodies when they came. And so as I became more and more public as a business person, I became more and more private as an artist. And when I took over at Activision and I was an officer of a public company and I had to speak on an earnings call every 12 weeks, I became completely uncomfortable being public with my music. Maybe that was all in my head. I don't know. It just felt like no one wanted to hear your love songs when you've got thousands of employees and, investors, and, it just felt like serious business. And I wanted to at least appear to be completely on point. But I think with the time that a lot of people spend, I don't know, playing golf, doing stuff that I don't do, I was always doing this. And so when I stepped down as the CEO of Activision, I, lucky to have the opportunity to kind of rebalance my life, the first thing I wanted to do was put out my music, because it was just, there was a moment when a friend who I really do consider a friend, who I was close to, but met through working at Activision, was at my house at a cocktail party and saw a guitar in the corner and said, "Oh, who plays guitar in the family?" And it was at that moment that I realized, wow, this has really become like a secret life, like it really was hidden from view. So I wanted to come out with an album and put myself out there as a musician publicly. And it's funny, there was a plan to come out with everything under a band name. The name of my first album was Spare Room. Spare Room was going to be the name of my band, quote unquote. because they didn't have a band. It was me, and I had a bunch of other session players and other musicians who contributed, but it wasn't really a band. But I thought like Connor Oberst goes on under Bright Eyes, Sam Beam goes out under Iron and Wine. I was just going to do that just to keep the Google searches separate. And my wife called me out on it. And she said, if you can't be comfortable being your whole self in public right now, you're never going to be. And, you should go out under your name and just be your whole self. And she was right. I took the leap, and I'm glad I did. And you know what? Nobody cared. It was all in my head. It was like, oh, you play music too? All right, cool. I'll give it a listen. Like there was no backlash or, there's that great Mark Twain quote that says, I think it was Mark Twain, you wouldn't care so much about what other people think about you if you knew how infrequently they do.
Yeah. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, For Real is your new single and latest collaboration with Grammy-nominated soul artist Aloe Blacc. Let's take a listen to it.
And I'm gonna break free before it breaks me. I've gotta believe that we can get back home for real, where we can feel and dance and take a chance and criticize and still survive and laugh and cry and disagree and still see one another for the sisters and the brothers that we are. Be all my trust, and I'm falling into all of your arms. All of you.
Now, Eric, this is actually your second time working together, as you first teamed up with Aloe in 2024 on the Dry January anthem, I Love Not Drinking.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through how this partnership began and how it's grown between these two collaborations?
Sure. It was completely serendipitous. We met through a common friend. Her name's Zem Joaquin. She puts on a TED-like conference that's awesome called the Near Future Summit every year. And she integrates music into the, in between the speeches, she'll sometimes have music acts. And they'll be thematic, right? So whatever is sort of being talked about on stage, she'll try to find a musical act or something that kind of fits with the theme. I was there to close the day that day because there were some speeches about addiction or about that kind of theme. And she wanted to end on a little bit of a higher note. And my song, I Love Not Drinking, is on theme with those topics, but way more joyful and way more fun and kind of a fun anthem. And Aloe was the musical act in the morning. And she put us together, I think, on a group text saying, you guys need to meet, and Aloe, you need to hear Eric's song. I think she knew he was also a non-drinker. So I think she thought it would, speak to him. And so we met, we hung out, I played it for him, he liked it. And it was just one of these great rock and roll spontaneity moments where I kind of had the thought bubble over my head. I wonder if he would sing this with me. And then I just went for it. And I said, you want to perform it together? And he's like, sure. And I had a couple hours before I went on. We literally went out behind the venue, like, sitting between two air conditioning units and rehearsed it. And he learned it. And then we took the stage together and got the whole place singing it together. And, that's a great way to start any friendship, So then I said, I had already recorded the studio version. It wasn't out yet, but I said, if I reopen the mix, you want to come in and, lay down what you did today, on the studio track? He said, yes. And then we became friends, and we actually performed together again at another event and did both his songs and the song we did together, I Love Not Drinking. And then eventually we said we should write a song together. We have good chemistry, and, we have interesting conversations about the world and see things sometimes the same, sometimes differently, but always good conversations. And that's how this song came about. We were having a conversation about our phones, and we both said, this would make a good topic for a song.
Well, I want to lean into that a little bit because your music leans heavy into the folk and Americana genres, while Aloe's vibe sits more in the soul world.
Yeah.
When you two got together, how did you blend those styles in a way that pulled from both of those backgrounds, but still felt natural to each of your respective genres?
Again, it started with a good conversation. It was the first topic, actually. We said, we've got to find a genre that works with both of our styles or both of our natural settings. What is that? And we had a good chat about it, and we pulled up some, kind of spirit animal tracks. And I had never heard Aloe's voice used kind of in this way. He has that gospel tone to him, but it's usually kind of pop-based R&B and pop-based production. And I kind of wanted to put him more in that Hosier lane, a little bit more of that God rays coming through the stained glass, windows. And that has a lot of folk in it. That has a lot of roots in it, but it also has this kind of big modern production to it. And we thought, okay, if we can get on the 50-yard line between those two things, this is what it would sound like. And I don't know, you tell me how you think we did, but I feel like we found a spot that really got the best out of both of us.
I think it was an absolute home run.
Thank you.
Well, the song carries what I consider to be a really powerful message about pushing past the things that divide us. Because if there's one thing about that's what's happening in the world now is there's a ton of division, especially when it comes to technology and social media.
Yes.
Since you spent such a huge part of your career in the tech world, does this song feel like a bit of a change of heart for you, or is it more of a self-reflection on what you've seen from maybe the inside?
No, I understand why you're asking the question, but no, I think that there's different lanes within the tech world. I actually think video games are one of the things that bring us together. I think games like Call of Duty cut across all partisan politics, age groups, racial groups, everybody plays. It's one of the few things everybody does, and it's a beautifully, naturally inclusive, diverse audience, that's attracted to those big blockbuster games. So that's very different than social media and different than what's happened to, what we used to call the news. I don't know what to call it now, but anybody in the tech world that has a kind of endless scroll to manage develops an algorithm, and let's assume best intentions. Let's assume that they are trying to detect what we like and what we prefer. That may be what they were aiming for, but they hit what you can't ignore by mistake. And what you can't ignore is not always what you like, and it's not always what's good for you. It's just the thing you can't look away from because it enrages you, or it makes you afraid, or it makes you feel some kind of tribal connection to your quote unquote team. And that there's so much of that in our world right now. And, technological change often brings about some kind of upheaval. There was a lot of fake news at the beginning of the printing press, I've read, so there are some analogs, but we definitely don't have our arms around it yet as a society. And there's nobody I know who isn't trying to use it less, who isn't trying to disconnect from those powerful tools that are dividing us. So that was our starting point lyrically. And I think the first line we wrote was the first line in the song, "Why am I so addicted to the bad news?" And it went from there. And I feel like all songwriting, all the best songs, all my favorite songs, just as a music fan, find some personal experience that ladders up to a universal experience. And that's why love songs and breakup songs are so timeless, because most people can relate to them. This is something a lot of people unfortunately can relate to right now. So, hopefully it's striking a chord out there.
It did with me, because the opening line, "Why am I so addicted to bad news?" I literally have written in my bullet points as something that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
What am I so afraid of? Why am I so confused? Why am I so addicted to the bad news?
Now, as creatives, there is the tension here, because the song encourages stepping back from social media. But at the same time, if you're a musician or a podcaster such as myself,
there's no
using social media is kind of part of the beast.
Yeah.
What do you think a healthy balance looks like? Or maybe the better question is, what balance do you personally try to aim for?
Okay, so I don't want to get in trouble with Meta, which I am trying to use as a marketing platform.
You and me both.
Yeah. I uninstall it from my phone every time after using it, and I only use it for this. Meaning if you scroll through I used to, just like everybody, I used to post pictures of my kids and my opinions. And I stopped a long time ago because I felt like this is tearing us apart, and I don't want to be a part of it. So I use it as a tool to promote my music and to share my music. I actually challenge the assumption that we all need it. I know none of us will have the guts to try to go without it, but I have noticed that I'll give you one anecdote. I had one Instagram reel go truly viral, 5.3 million views.
Oh, wow.
You know, many multiples more than my average or than the next highest one. You know, I don't know why. It was like chorus 2 of track 7 of my last album, you know, and I had already posted chorus 1. So, you know, that chorus had already had a shot on goal and it didn't connect. And I scrolled past it. It was like weeks later. I'm like, wait, I think my mind filled in 5.3K because everything else is in thousands. And it was 5.3 M. And I'm like, what? And I clicked on it. But when I look on a calendar at when that thing took off and had millions of people evidently clicking on it, sharing on it, commenting on it, liking it, I saw no correlative spike on Spotify or Apple Music. I saw no correlative spike in visits to my website. I call it a lamp that lights only itself. I think that Instagram is a lamp that doesn't shed light on other platforms. It doesn't radiate. It wants to keep you there. That's in their business interests. So they make it hard for you to leave. That's why they give you only one link in your bio, which is really frictiony and hard to find. They could make it really easy where like every post can have a link to the thing I want you to go do, the YouTube video or the Spotify track or wherever I want to take you. But they make that really hard because they want you to stay. So I feel like, okay, so it's another place where people heard a little piece of my song. At least it's getting out there. Hopefully there's some reverberation from that, but I can't prove it. So I don't know. We all do it because we feel like we all have to do it. But as far as my consumption, I really try to stay as off as I can. I can't handle it. Like every time I install it to put up the next reel or do whatever I have to do for my music, they know I'm back. They serve up something. They know that like, well, this is going to piss them off. I have to click on it and then I'm in it, you know, and sometimes an hour passes before I shake out of it and, you know, uninstall it again.
Well, I find it fascinating that you say all that because it's something that I've struggled with this podcast, where if you post a clip, yes, people might enjoy the clip on Instagram or on any of the sites, but then they don't go and actually listen to the full conversation.
Correct.
And being a 25-year radio veteran, to me, it's all about the full conversation or the full album listen or the full song.
Correct. And I don't know how old you are, Brian, but I'm a 20th century animal. I care about the albums. I care about the whole song. I don't know that Mr. Listener or Mrs. Listener out there really care about it as much as we do. And the way people are consuming music is changing. Is it for the worse? I don't know. We all have our biases about what we grew up with being the thing that we prefer. So of course, I think that's worse. And I still listen to stereo speakers with high resolution files or vinyl too. But I guess I've come to peace with the idea that wherever people connect with it and however they connect with it is what I want. So, you know, I've had people, you know, friends say, I heard your new song. And I'll always poke a little and go, oh, great. Awesome. Where'd you listen to it? Oh, on Instagram. And I'm like, well, then you haven't, in my mind, you haven't heard the song. You heard the second verse, maybe, you know, or you heard the guitar lead or the chorus or whatever that post was. But that's okay. You know, we got to meet people where they are, and music still matters. And if it touches people, just hearing the clip, if your podcast, you know, connects with someone, just seeing the clip that you, you know, the brief portion of it that you post, that's still good content for them. You still made them think.
Well, I am going to embed the entire music video as well as the making of on the episode page over at myweeklymixtape.com. If anybody listening wants to view the entire video for this song, I want to dive into the actual music part of this now.
Okay.
Because in the making of it and the video itself, you see the band playing, you kind of get this feel. Can you talk about the recording process? Was this done live? Because it has a very live, vulnerable feel to the track. And you had mentioned gospel in that.
Yeah.
I catch that from the performance.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear more about how the song came together in the studio.
Okay. So I know no other gear than to be authentic. We were not recording it the day that we filmed it. So we were playing it. And, so it's funny, all those musicians who are playing with me are all super experienced, and they all commented on, hey, at least we were playing it today. A lot of times I just come in and lip sync, and I guess that's fairly normal. But to me, that felt like a step too far in authenticity. So we just played it over and over again, and we had a great director and second cameraman there to capture it. And so those moments are moments where the chemistry is real, the moment where the drummer hits just at the right moment in the chorus, the lights start to shine. All of that's real and all that's being captured. And then of course there's an editing process where you try to match the best takes to, but it was important to me that we all actually be plugged in and playing it. But that wasn't the day we recorded it. And that actually wasn't the room we recorded it in. The recording process was actually more in pieces. And the reason for that was because we started, Aloe and I, in this room with a writing session. And for me, as the technology has progressed and the writing process and the production process have become very intertwined, because you have the ability now to stick a mic in front of an amp and capture something at a really high level of quality as you're writing it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you go back and replay it, and sometimes you're like, yeah, that first take was pretty good. So Aloe and I had a full session where we wrote it and we came up with at least big pieces of it together. And then there was a month of me kind of sweating through, piecing together, trying different instrumentations. And then there was, his involvement, commenting and adding things as we went. But it really kind of went piece by piece. And then for me, there's also a process where I know enough on my instrument is guitar and singing. I know enough behind a drum set and enough behind a keyboard to be dangerous, but it's not professional grade. So I'll usually get kind of a thumbnail sketch down of what I'm hearing on the drums or what I'm hearing on the keyboards, but that almost always bring in much better players than me. And so Michael Chavez on the lead guitar, Blair Cinta on the drums, Nir Russell on the piano, Will Hensley, who you met earlier, my engineer, he actually is an excellent guitar player as well, and he contributed. So those other musicians always make my work better. And it's almost like you have to remind yourself you're not good enough. Like don't think that this demo is good enough. And sometimes you do. Sometimes you're like, oh, it's pretty good as is. And then you bring in Blair Cinta and you're always surprised. Oh my God, he brought so much to the party. You bring in Michael Chavez and he does things that you would have never thought to do, because that's where they have their 10,000 hours, not where I have mine. I have mine as a writer and as a singer and maybe as a rhythm guitarist. But people who think about nothing but playing the guitar, they're going to bring better ideas to your stuff. And I always want my stuff to be elevated by other people.
Well, For Real is the first glimpse of your upcoming album, More Is Not the Answer, which is arriving in 2026. Musically, how does this track set the tone for the rest of the album? Because we talked about the difference in genres from your last efforts. Does it line up with the overall sound where you're headed, or is this more of a standalone moment in the bigger picture?
I felt like that conversation I referenced earlier where Aloe and I were talking about what genre is this going to be in. That was a great conversation for the song For Real that we wrote together. And it turned out to be a really great conversation for me as an artist, because it pushed me out of a comfort zone that I've always stayed in, which is that kind of very honest roots rock folk vibe. And for me, there's almost like a religion towards that. And it's always like you want the players in the room together. You want the mics on the instrument. You don't want anything synthetic or inauthentic. And with For Real, suddenly I'm playing with soundscapes and I'm playing with more produced elements than I ever have before. And I actually really liked it. And I actually thought it took my kind of folky, introspective songwriting and put it on a little bit of a more elevated scale. So the rest of the album is attempting to stay in that lane. It wouldn't go on the album otherwise. It would be such an outlier if you went from that song back to fingerpick guitar, in a room with three other guys. It just felt like, okay, this is a new lane that I'm going to stay in. And so all the other songs have that production vibe. And hopefully you can intuit a little bit from the name, More Is Not the Answer. The themes of For Real are themes that, appear throughout the album as well. Not everything's about the phone, not everything's about division, but I just observed in my life the things that I've gotten happier and happier in recent years by the things I'm doing less of, not the things I'm adding to my life. It's addition by subtraction. And that's sort of the theme of the album. And, we have a lot more than we used to as a society. We have more news, but we're less informed. We have more entertainment, but we're more bored. We have more ways to connect, quote unquote, but we're lonelier and, more disconnected. So a lot of the things that are supposed to be providing more are actually delivering less. And so the album is really about recalibrating for that new reality.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, since this show is called My Weekly Mixtape, I'd like to bring this full circle, if you don't mind. If you had to put together a 5-song playlist, we'll call it a playlist.
Okay.
That tells somebody everything they need to know about Eric Hirshberg, the music fan. What 5 songs would you pick and why?
Okay. Well, let's see. If I was just going to try to squint and pick my 5 biggest influences, that kind of are in there, I would have to pick a Tom Waits song. I would probably pick Gun Street Girl by Tom Waits. I would have to pick a Rolling Stone song. It would probably be Gimme Shelter, which was also the first song I ever put in a Call of Duty commercial, by the way. The very first There's a Soldier in All of Us ad, a classic. I think there would do you know Josh Ritter?
Yep.
He has a song called The Curse, which I can't listen to it without tearing up. And it's just, I often think at their best songs can be little movies, little epic journeys. And I don't know that I've ever accomplished that with one of my songs, but I always try to channel that. And I feel like that song is like the Odyssey in a 3.5 minute pop song. It just takes me on such a journey. I would say, God, I really admired Taylor Goldsmith of Dawes. Maybe that Western Skyline.
Ooh, nice.
Or maybe May All Your Favorite Bands Stay Together. He has a wink and a humor. He's a really deep writer.
Oh yeah.
But there's humor in his stuff. And I Love Not Drinking and a couple of other songs, I've added a little bit of a wink that I feel like I learn a lot from him. And then I'd have to probably pick, there's maybe Aretha Franklin's, that whole album of, I Never Loved a Man the Way That I Love You. I can't remember the name of the album, but Aretha's a huge influence of mine. There's a bunch of soul. It's why Aloe and I got on well. There's a bunch of Al Green in there. There's a bunch of Marvin Gaye in there. I don't know. Does that give you, but then I completely left out Pink Floyd, which, is hugely influential on me. And I completely left out all the other folk artists. Paul Simon is a huge influence on me. I don't know.
That's why I saved the tough questions for last.
That's a tough one, man. That is a tough one. The other thing is that I didn't mention any female artists, and a lot of my intake is female artists. Like I'm obsessed with Lorde right now. I'm obsessed with have you heard the new Florence and the Machine record?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. It's like reading the Bible. Like, I don't know how she has such a scale to her drama, and you just get pulled in awake, with no skis. So like a lot of female artists have been hugely influential on me as well. Liz Phair, who's also a friend, her stuff is so confessional and so kind of like outrageously unguarded and personal. And she pushed me very early on, many years ago. Like, yeah, you got some talent, but you're not going deep enough. Like you're pulling the punches. I don't even know what this lyric means. She was the first one to say, no, if you want to look, you don't have to do this, but if you want to be a songwriter, you really got to put yourself out there. And I feel like I have done that. I feel like, I don't know whether it's been worth it. I don't know whether it connects with people, but I've gotten very personal and very comfortable, being unguarded. And again, just kind of like the story I told about putting it out there in the first place. Everyone's like, oh, cool. It's a very personal song, So, you're always, the voices in your head are always way more scared than the reality, I find.
Well, For Real is available now on all streaming platforms, and Eric's third album, More Is Not the Answer, is set to arrive in 2026. Eric, thank you so much for joining me today on My Weekly Mixtape.
I really enjoyed it, Brian. Thank you. Great questions.
And remember, you can hear the song over on the episode page at myweeklymixtape.com. And while you're there, you can visit the contact page to send in any ideas you'd like to hear on future episodes of the show. You can also reach out to me on social media at myweeklymixtape. And you can connect with the Mixtaper community at patreon.com/myweeklymixtape. It's free to join, and there's several tiers if you'd like to support the show a little bit extra. My name is Brian Colburn. This has been My Weekly Mixtape. Enjoy listening to For Real, and I'll see you next time. Take care.